Okay, the next thing here we've got is the marking criteria, and I will go through this now. You'll notice that question 1, which is about the aim, asks you to do two things. Clearly state the problem and suggest a use for your results. 2 marks if you can do both of those things, just 1 mark if you just clearly state the problem, 0 if neither of those is present. Moving on to question 2, the information is summarised is relevant and it is explained. The information shows understanding of content and they are referenced according to the Clancy referencing policy. 1 mark in total there, and remember you need to have 2 sources, okay? So to get the full marks for that you need to have 2 sources. I'd be suggesting that if you only do 1 source we will be giving you half a mark, and you do it correctly we'll be giving you half a mark for each of those. Question 3, which talks about the equipment. If you list all the equipment and justify why you have used each bit, then you get 3 marks. Anything less than that, just the equipment listed, 2 marks, and only partially done would be only worth 1 mark. Moving on to question 4, which talks about the variables. All 3 types of variable are identified: the independent, the dependent, and the controlled variables. Okay, a description of how you will measure the dependent variable, okay, also included, and how variables will be controlled, and you have also at the end got to include a control as well, or show how you are going to include a control there as well. Now you notice there are 3 things to do here. That's 3 marks. Here's your 4th one, with that how you'll measure the independent variable. 5th one there is about how variables will be controlled, and the last one, 6th one, is the control. So that's 6 marks in total. Now if you do any 5 of the above, 5 marks, any 4 of the above, 4 marks, and so on. If you don't do any of those it'll be 0. Moving on now to question 5, the method outlines. Now notice I'm using these words again: clear, safe, and logical procedural, and it's got to be plausible as well. So it is. So I guess logical and plausible, similar in that it should be realistic. And finally, this last bit here, which I've mentioned a few times now, about it being detailed enough. You need to include enough detail there. Again, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 things that need to be included there for a total of 5 marks. Any 4 of them, it'll be less. 4, 3, 2, 1. As described there. Question 6, almost to the end of the part 1 now. If you make an educated guess and it is based on your background research, so it'd be really great if you could mention some of your research that you did in question 2 there. 2 marks if you make an educated guess that is based on background research, and you'll need to mention the background research because how else will we know that you have actually based it on the background research. A guess made, just the 1 mark, and no attempt, obviously 0. And question 7, just 1 mark for establishing an appropriate timeline. And I think one of the other things about your timeline is that when you come to doing that, we might be able to help you out with some advice if we think you might be rushed for time. So that's the main reason for really doing a timeline, so that we can have a look and see that you have planned effectively and that there's not any advice that we can give you that might help you out there. So now we move on to part 2. Obviously the first part of part 2 is conducting your experiment. Even if you are doing one of the ones that's going to take a little bit longer time to conduct your experiment, like anything where you are growing plants or anything like that, you've got the 2 weeks of the holidays to be able to spend a fair bit of time on that. So take care when conducting your experiment and just make sure you're following your instructions. Now the next couple of bits, the aim, I guess the apparatus and the method, diagram, results, and also the conclusion are fairly similar to what we usually do. There's probably only a couple of exceptions there. The hypothesis you basically should have already done from part 1, so you can just include that there as well. Also the aim, also the apparatus. I guess the big change here is this one here. Make sure that you add any improvements that were suggested at your interview with your teacher. Okay, your method, we are going to be able to compare your method from part 1 to your method to part 2. And I think it would be worthwhile also for you to highlight, like either by using italics or by using bold, to highlight some of the changes that you made or the suggestions that you took on board. Part of being a good research scientist is taking advice from people and trying to improve your experimental design in consultation with other people, and that's why we want you to do that part of your assessment there. As I said, diagram results, fairly familiar to what you usually do. However, you can include photographs in your results there, and I think it would definitely be appropriate to include tables, okay? But it's observations only. You're not analysing your results, because you're analysing your results in the discussion, okay? So you're taking your results, and I think when we get down to the marking criteria, you'll be able to see some of those things that you can do in your discussion, which might make it really high quality. Also, are there any improvements were you to carry out the experiment again? Are there any improvements that you could suggest there? And recommendations for further research. So moving on to, like, you've done your experiment and you've learnt something hopefully from doing your experiment, but where does that lead to? You know, in science, we tend to have ideas building on other ideas. So after your experiment, what do you think is another problem that someone could investigate? And perhaps we might even give that to the Year 9s when they do that next year, so that they can do your suggested research. Okay, so, and finally, conclusion. Again, very familiar to what we do. Remember, when you're doing a conclusion, we need to refer back to the aim there, of course, as well.